Right, are we all, is everyone on who needs to be on? Is Judith joining us, Joe?
Judith is just joining now.
Right, there she is. Right, well, Judith will get to us when she can.
I'm here.
Oh, hiya, love. I can't see everybody on the screen for some reason. Thank you all for coming. As you all know, we never, ever intended this APPG to be spending so much time talking about COVID. It wasn't something we anticipated. It seems like a lifetime ago that we first started talking to some of you lovely people about something completely different to what we're talking about now. But we are where we are, and there's not much we can do about it. We have to do the best that we can. And I think we've been quite successful in the things that we've done. I think we've certainly managed to raise up the agenda, the issues around the industry. Judith and I have a op-ed in today's Red Box, which was really good. If anybody's not a chance to read it, just talking about, we actually name check Urban. Jack, we get you in there and talk about the work that you guys are doing, how important it is. Interestingly enough, the lady who does my nails has decided she can't hang around anymore, and she stopped working. During the time that she was not working, she diversified and was making jewellery, and after building up a really good successful business as a nail technician, she's now said goodbye to it, and she's gone into that. And I've gone to several salons over the last couple of weeks, sorry, for different things, and I'm hearing the same thing everywhere I'm going, just how many people have lost technicians or therapists, and how people are afraid that there isn't the security in the industry that there was. And I noticed it, so from just the brief conversations I was having with people. So it's not good, and I think we have to really think about what more we could do to, I mean, and we talk about this all the time, and it just seems that just when you think you get in somewhere, there's some other spanner in the works. Mr. Dowd, how nice to see you.
Lovely to see you too.
Mr. Dowd is on my screen, looking resplendent, with red artwork behind him.
Yes, thank you very much.
Boots were made for walking. So on that note, we're going to talk and listen today to some people who probably experiencing this at the coalface, as it were. And we're going to hear from Victoria Brownlie. No, I can't see. I can see you now. I can see Victoria. Millie, who's not joining us because she's unfortunately not able to join us, but Helen that is speaking instead. Jack Tang from Urban, Judith Hadley. Yeah, I can see Judith. Alan Billington. I can see Alan and Diane Hay. Thank you all for coming and making a contribution. Before you, I mean, I'm just going to hand over the floor to you actually, but before you just say what you want to say, just give us a little brief around who you are and your role in this. And I'm just going to open the floor, and we'll start with Victoria. Over to you.
Thank you. So I'm Victoria Brownlie. I'm Director of Policy and Public Affairs at the National Hair and Beauty Federation. Normally it would be my colleague Caroline Larissy speaking specifically on education, but she's unfortunately had an accident and dislocated her clavicle, which is a very horrible injury, so she can't be here today. So I'm just speaking on behalf of her in regards to really what's happened in terms of skills specifically as a result of COVID. And if we were really honest, there was a decline in apprenticeships pre-COVID. We'd seen around 10,000 apprenticeships per year, the year 2019, and now in 2020, that had declined by 30% to around 7,000. And we think that can be attributed to quite a few things, but primarily, most likely, the move to more self-employed model in our industry in particular, and the sector just not really adapting to that, and the way that the skills and training program is built is very much built around premises and training people in physical premises. So that's proved difficult. But in respect of COVID specifically, I think the main barriers for us are social distancing and capacity issues, and the time in which that continues, whether that ends on the 21st of June or most likely doesn't, that will continue to be the single biggest factor affecting if and how people can have apprentices or continue to keep apprentices on during this time. So we've had a 55% cut in people in apprentices being within salons so far since COVID began, and only 11% have said that they are likely to take on new apprentices in the next 3 to 6 months because of the various problems that we have with restrictions. And that comes into the fact that now, because of the number of people you can have in your salon, that's both clients and staff. The staff that you have in there need to be your biggest earners, the people bringing in the most money to you. And primarily now, those people are fulfilling all the functions that you might have had a shampooist or an apprentice doing. So, for example, me, when I went to have my hair cut the other day, it was the person that's my stylist was also greeting me at the door, taking my coat, offering me a drink, going shampooing my hair, blow drying my hair after she cut it. Whereas before it might have been several people that I'd speak to during that process. Now it's one person doing all of those jobs, and therefore all of those jobs have gone as a result of that. And so from that point of view, the apprentice is the first to go. Another barrier for the apprentices and training during this time has been the continued increase in national minimum wage rates. And whilst we completely agree that people deserve a fair wage, there has to be a really careful balance at the moment between making sure those businesses are there in the first place to employ these people, and not just a bulldog approach to, well, we're going to continue to increase wage rates regardless of whether there's going to be the businesses there to support these employers. And we did a wages survey really recently because we're contributing to the Local Pay Commission's report into this at the moment. And 63% of those that responded said that they were going to be cutting back on apprentices solely because of the national minimum wage rate increases. And those increases have a massive effect as well in terms of the older learners. So as the way that apprentices work, the first year you pay an apprenticeship rate, and the second year you pay the rate of which is relevant to the particular age of the person that you've got an apprenticeship for. And in the respect of the older learners, that basically doubles the costs to the employer. So you'd be paying basically equivalent of having 2 younger apprentices just for having 1 older one. So it just completely disincentivizes any prospect of having older learners, which is a real shame, because as an industry, we want to be encouraging people at all stages of their life to be coming into this sector and utilizing the fact that it's flexible around people's work and commitments. And that's something that we've always really celebrated as an industry. So I think that in particular is a real shame. So that has been a real barrier. The government has tried to come in with good intentions around the Kickstart scheme, traineeships, apprentices, T-levels. We've got some concerns about the actual T-levels in terms of what they're actually training people to do, whether it's very theory-based or actually going to be helping people when they work in the salons. But generally, on the whole, we understand that they're trying to do a good thing there. But generally, these things that are coming in are quite cumbersome, difficult to administer, really built around larger businesses administering them, maybe having a solely HR person that can come in and deal with all the admin that goes in around implementing a scheme like that. And that leads to problems with smaller businesses finding them quite difficult to access, and they're not very accessible to smaller businesses. So really what we need is these kind of schemes more accessible to SMEs in particular, built around an SME model. We're 94% employing less than 10 people in our sector, so we are very much SME based and micro business based. Also maybe building these kind of grants and incentive schemes around a new model around self-employed people, the one-man bands. We want them to be bringing in apprentices as well if we're moving to a more self-employed model. It seems to be going that way around the gig economy. We also need the cost that has been incurred by employers as a result of the closure period. So that's on average between £4,000 and £7,000 in addition, and that employers are going to be having to pay because of the fact that apprentices have not been able to train during and learn their practical skills during the closure periods, that's going to cost employers between £4,000 and £7,000 extra for them to be able to complete their courses. If we want employers to do this and not just to be dropping apprentices off before they finish their qualifications, then we need to be supporting them through that process to help them meet those costs at a time when they've got 100 other costs that they can barely cope with at the moment, and growing debts and things that they're trying to deal with. And the £3,000 that the government has brought in specifically to try and encourage people into apprenticeships, there's one major flaw in that at the moment, where it only applies to new starters. And how it generally works in our sector is that you might bring somebody in as a Saturday staff, or in hair in particular, a shampooist, check their commitment to the role and to the industry. And then if you both mutually agree that it's something that they want to do, you may then start them on the path through an apprenticeship. So the way that the grant scheme works at the moment is only people brand new coming directly into apprenticeships will be eligible for that, and £3,000 for the employer. And that just doesn't really work in an industry such as ours, where it's sort of a try before you buy kind of experience, where you need both the employer and the employee to both mutually agree that it's something that you want to both invest in for the next 2 years, because it's quite a significant investment for the employers to be taking on. So really, they're the main things we need from us: more tailored to SMEs, more help and support to directly make these apprenticeships and further training accessible and attractive to employers, better recognition of the older apprenticeship rate, not an increase of minimum wage rates at a time when it's much too fragile economically and from a business point of view, and the sorting out of this overlooked situation around the new apprentices not being eligible for the £3,000 grant.
Thank you. Thanks ever so much. You know, my camera's going on and off all the time, and I'm not touching it. Thank you. Thanks ever so much. Well, it's not good, is it? But that was really interesting to hear. Jack, over to you, love.
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Urban. So Urban is an online marketplace to book wellness services, specifically in people's homes. So I guess our biggest challenge as an operator and being very in tune with what the public is experiencing is that, you know, since the pandemic, there's some key trends that we're deeply concerned about, particularly around skill shortages. So since the start of the pandemic, March 2020 till now, we've seen across our entire network an attrition of about 35% of specifically massage and complementary therapists. And putting that into sort of absolute numbers, that equates to about 1,400 practitioners across the 4 markets that we currently operate in the UK. That's deeply concerning for us, and you know, we have been drilling down into the reasoning and the whys. And what we found is that there are a couple of dynamics here. I think, firstly, we've seen that nearly 40% of the attrition were relating to reasons including relocation back to their home countries, and a lot of obviously European workers in the UK within the service economy. And obviously that coupled with COVID and the lack of work during the period meant that people had made permanent relocation and not looking to return back into the UK. And I think, obviously this is a huge impact to our business and to obviously the clients and the patients that we work with. So that's the first trend that we are, trying to really solve pretty urgently. As on the other side, what we observed is that with the pandemic, there's been greater levels of stress and anxiety across the board. People working from home have started to really develop long-term and acute sort of back pain and other pains and mobility issues, which we obviously in our network practitioner can address. And I think what we're seeing is that there is a huge imbalance right now. So, for our business, we've observed that we are currently about 30% higher than our pre-COVID levels. So we are, as a platform, operating at all-time highs in terms of the demand and the search volumes that we're seeing across our entire websites and apps. And equally on the other side, the provider side, we are down 35%. So you can see that there is a big gap, between the two, the 60% gap between the supply and demand matching at the moment. We're concerned, obviously, because there are a lot of people that are not being serviced for these reasons, and ultimately it kind of compounds into a potential burden and impact on the NHS and the healthcare systems. So yeah, we obviously raised this as a critical point as a business and a commercial entity perspective to the wider industry, and hopefully with working in coalition with the APPG and educators, we can hopefully at least in the country we can solve that issue by enabling and encouraging more people to train into industry for both the massage complementary therapies as well as the beauty verticals as well. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Jack. That's excellent. Judith, you next. Thanks, Judith.
Hi, everyone. I'm Judith Hadley from the Federation of Holistic Therapists. I'm here on behalf of them today, partly because we've got no executive director at the moment, and Karen Young, who normally attends, is on another call. So obviously I'm here just to, obviously from our point of view, we have 12,000 plus members that are all self-employed. Some work in clinics, hospices. We do have beauty and complementary therapies. I obviously across both. And our figures show that our therapists and practitioners treat people to save them the burden on the NHS. 75% of them would go to a complementary therapist as opposed to a GP for medication because of anxiety, depression, job losses, bereavement, that sort of thing. And through the pandemic, obviously it's not been able to happen. And the burden on the NHS is going to be absolutely compounding. It's just going to get worse if it's not addressed. But recently, obviously, with the letter that came forward, which we've supported, the level 3 qualifications that are currently not eligible for the national skills funding, we're sort of really disappointed to see that most of the complementary therapies aren't on there. So even for the retraining, I've been sort of quite privileged to be part of the new national occupational standards and the writing of the new apprentices, the level 3 wellbeing and holistic, and they're much, much needed out there. However, not just for the apprenticeships, but for mature learners, coming from a background of teaching complementary therapists for many years, the majority, or 50% plus, we used to be mature learners, like 19 plus, 25 plus. Suddenly there's no funding available for them. And sometimes college needs the mature learners to sort of stabilise the younger ones. The younger ones, yes, obviously they're very motivated and want to learn. Obviously there's apprenticeship problems from the beginning of the pandemic, but now the apprenticeship programs for 19 plus put so much more pressure financially on the employer. And I think obviously this just needs, we all need to stick together. We've got a stronger voice together. Regarding the letter, obviously we've tried to get more signatures and we will continue to. But I think unless we help the NHS, well, it'll just spiral out of, unbelievably. And I don't know what else to say really, because again, Victoria and Jack, we're all singing from the same song, we're all saying the same things. And unless we sort of have a strong voice and get these national qualifications on the skills funding for mature learners. I mean, some of the therapists that have retrained from losing their jobs make really fantastic practitioners. And without them, it's going to be sort of, well, we'll be in dire straits, I think.
Okay, thanks for that. Emma? Emma? No?
Sorry,
Okay,
Emma's just emailed me like an hour ago, so I'll put mention sending her apologies because she had a clash with another panel that she had to speak at.
right, so Emma's not here. Okay, so Millie, over to you, Helena.
Hi, afternoon everyone. I'm Helena Gresk. I'm COO at the British Beauty Council. We're not a trade association, we're an advocacy group, but we represent cross-sector, everything through hair and beauty right through to manufacturing and the larger brands as well. So slightly different viewpoint on some of this. I agree largely with what's been said already, particularly on Victoria's point about the apprenticeships, the challenges with the wage increases and all those other variables. You know, it's very, very challenging, especially particularly while we're operating with the restrictions that we've already got. Cash flow is very sparse for many businesses, and they're really just trying to keep their heads above water at the moment. So having that additional apprenticeship or apprentice working within the business, sometimes at the moment, while they can't operate with a full team, and the additional financial burden is meaning that people are really looking away from that and having to make difficult choices about, you know, the people and who they can have in their business. So I do think we really need to come together and find a solution to this, and the shift to self-employment is only, you know, widening that gap really and reducing the number and the opportunity for apprenticeships, because generally sole traders aren't taking apprenticeships into their businesses. We had a really interesting conversation on one of our SPA meetings last week, and they were talking about kind of getting the older generation of therapists kind of back to beauty and getting those people who are already trained and skilled in our sector coming back into our industry, because we've seen a lot of people through COVID leave through various reasons, redundancies and other things, and have maybe settled now working in other sectors and necessarily have found, you know, maybe better, less antisocial working hours, or, you know, better pay, lots of different reasons, more flexibility working in other sectors than ours. So I think we really need to look at, we know that we've not got enough people coming into the sector from a training perspective, and we know that the apprenticeship numbers are dropping. So I think we probably need to batten down the hatches a little bit and see what we can do to attract those people who we've maybe lost from our sector, and understand why we've lost them, and see how we can attract those people back into working in our businesses again. So I think that's something that we need to really be thinking about, other than the funding side of things. A big thing that we know has been a challenge has been the shortage occupations list. So the Migration Advisory Committee did conduct some, some kind of research, but they definitely didn't consult with any of our groups I'm aware of in terms of industry. And as a result of that, we have been left off the shortage occupation list. And whilst we know that Brexit doesn't eliminate migration to the UK, but finding workers from abroad for diverse and specialist skill positions like we have in the personal care sector, certainly just looking at, you know, skills from other countries, and definitely looking at spa managers and therapy levels. I know from when I was in operations, more than 60, maybe 70% of my team weren't British workers, and were bringing various skills from other countries. And a lot of people have left the UK through COVID and have not returned to work here. And that's just another issue really that is challenging us, and again widening that skills gap and ability to recruit, and definitely affecting the number of people available for recruitment. There's lots of businesses who are trading 50 to 70% of their original COVID levels of trading, who really at the moment are coping, but are trying to recruit for positions if they're in a lucky enough position where they in that position in their business to do that now, but aren't actually able to take on new people because people are not applying for the roles. So I think we've got a wider problem that we need to cross yet. And just even with that Brexit thing, just thinking about our British workers at the moment, just thinking about kind of session hairdressers and session makeup artists who are maybe traveling internationally or through Europe to do, you know, fashion shoots and things like that, which we're renowned for as a British beauty industry. That's all been kind of very much restricted and minimised. There's lots of issues with visas and having to get the, there's lots of documentation and things that they need to do to travel with their kit and things like that, and that's really affecting the British freelance and session hair and makeup artists from getting that work which they would usually have. And then of course with that they travel and they take their team and the people they're training things with them as well, so that kind of level of opportunity is also being removed. So I think there's a lot of things what Habby have been doing and updating all the national occupational standards is fantastic, and that's really important. I think definitely, you know, we've supported with some task force work on the diversity and inclusion side of things, and it's incredibly important that we get that right. But again, do we have the right level of funding to support kind of higher level apprenticeships? We've just released, and I'll share it with you, Caroline, if you've not got it, a mental health and well-being paper which we did some research on, and we've got some recommendations in there really looking at the need for additional skills and funding for those higher level, above a level 3, to really kind of focus on upskilling the workforce. And it ties in really well actually with Judith, what you were saying about the need for us as a sector to really support the NHS. You know, the NHS is on its knees, mental health and other issues are at an all-time high, and we are a sector highly skilled where we can support remedially through our services to help ease symptoms and support people with other ways rather than the traditional healthcare route through these things. But with that additional investment and ability to upskill the people working in our sector and actually give people that vision of a career path that's not just to a level 3 and actually giving people that long-term vision of a career path, we've got the opportunity to open so many more doors and opportunity for people. So yeah, I think there's lots of issues. I mean, we are all clearly singing from the same hymn sheet, but I think in terms of the challenges that we're facing, I think they're quite vast.
Okay, thanks for that. Alan. You're on mute, Alan.
Sorry, that's a bad habit. Hi, I'm Alan Billington. I'm the head of programme for health and wellbeing at City Lit, and we provide training in complementary therapies. Our drive is really about funding, and we've had a look at the National Skills Funding list, and as has been said, there's literally nothing. I think anatomy and physiology is about the only level 3 qualification that's in there. And it seems really unbalanced when it comes to complementary health. So we want to drive for funding to enable students to enter into complementary therapies. We think that obviously with COVID, we've had to reduce the numbers that we take on. We have been able to run programs, luckily, but with a reduction of 50%. And we do get applications, but again, because of COVID, there's a lot of unsurety about whether people are going to continue or take on because of COVID and what's happening. But we do hope we can take people on. The funding that we do have is the Learning Loans Fund, and that really isn't sufficient. We're only getting students who, I suppose, can take on that additional cost, really. What we really want is to be added to the Learning Skills Fund, really, so that many other potential students or therapists can access the programs, really. We've, over the last few weeks, as restrictions have been lessened, we've started getting charities, NHS, cancer areas contacting us for therapists. So we know that there's a drive for therapists and that there is a skills gap, really, and we want to be able to provide the training for that. Really, I agree with what everybody else has said. I can't add anything to
That's fine.
what I've said. So yeah, that's all I can add at the moment. We're looking for funding.
Okay, so and last but not least, Diane.
Hello, I'll just unmute myself. You think I'd have got used to that by now, wouldn't you really? Good afternoon all. There's a number of people on here who already know me, and I've spoken and presented at the APPG before, so thank you very much for asking me to join you. I am also stepping in at short notice for Caroline this afternoon again because of her accident. So my role pretty much behind me, you can see I'm the operational chair of the Beauty Professional Apprenticeship Suite. So that's the group of employers that are responsible for coming up with the standards that are used within the apprenticeship. And very timely, the Wellbeing Holistic Therapy Standard has been released for use, and it is a culmination of huge amounts of input from all our employers, and Judith's been contributing to that all the way through, and our other employers. And it is a culmination of years and years of knowledge and information that can give people a really good entry and journey point to being a wellbeing holistic therapist and being fully holistic in that way. We mentioned funding. That actually has a £9,000 funding band, which means for a provider, that is something that they will draw down as a provider. In my day job, I'm a therapist, I'm a salon owner, and I'm also a training provider. So we do deliver the actual apprentices in a spa for a spa group. We work with levy paying and non-levy paying employers. Smaller SME employers, my business has been built on apprentices. We only have one member of staff didn't start with us as an apprentice. Some of them have been with me for 10 years. It's an absolutely fantastic model. It's a pipeline of the future. We just need to tell more people how to access it and make it work well. Yes, there's lots of rules and regulations around it. I had Ofsted visit me last week, which was lovely, and all is well. However, there are ways to make this work to future-proof our sector and fill those skills gaps. I'm also the chair of the National Occupational Standards Steering Group, so it does bring both the apprenticeship agenda and FE agenda together, so that we've got commonality across all the devolved nations and England with the T levels, the FE provision and the apprenticeship. So there is a standard that's a practice standard for entry to the workforce from level 2 upwards. Also, people moving from a different sector have to go back to level 2 to get the foundation entry skills, because you can't actually progress if you don't have those skills, those basic skills that we get at entry point. But with the Wellbeing Holistic Therapy Standard, again, contributed to Helena's paper that went in with regards to what we can do for the well-being of the nation, but the demand is outweighing the actual numbers within our industry because of all the things that we've said. Brexit, you've now got to sponsor somebody to bring them to the UK. SPA's predominantly relied on foreign nationals to fill those positions. They have gone home, and the employers don't want to take on board the sponsorship of having people. So again, it's this pipeline of succession. And actually, I think what has happened out of the pandemic is that our sector has very much been seen for the value that it gives to everybody's everyday life and the difference it does make. And it's been seen as a different type of profession to what it predominantly was with the stereotypical ideas that it had before. But there are ways of doing it. We've had learners on delay. We flipped our training. We have had new starts. So we probably booked the trend in regards to some of what's been said this afternoon. So we did flip learning, so theory first and practical when we can do that. But also there's concern for the young people coming out of training in FE this year, because they've qualified on a 70% threshold, whereas an apprentice has qualified on a competency threshold, which means they've had to do the lot. My learners have done 92% of their actual competency-based assessments, which means they combined a leg wax, half leg and full leg wax, whereas in colleges, young people coming out have had a lot less face-to-face contact, obviously, as they all have. They've had teacher assessed grades, and because their qualification happened to fall into a band of a type of qualification, so it was a technical level, as opposed to an MVQ or a competency-based qualification, but ultimately these qualifications give a certificate to practice. So they are going out into the workplace, and they are not fully confident or equipped to actually really be on the shop floor, and that's something that employers are going to have to pick up. An SME employer can get a digital account to enter the apprenticeship market and take on an apprentice, and they are in control. It's no longer the funding, non-levy funding method that it was before. Every small employer can get a digital account to take on an apprentice if they've got the finance to be able to do it. I very much back up what Victoria said about the challenges about taking new apprentices in, because if you've got people in your workforce, so we've got a cohort of level 2s going through to level 3s, their employer won't get that incentive because they've already been employed. You know, they've succeeded in very difficult circumstances. We've had no funding for that particular group since September because they've been on programme. Their EPA was delayed. Summer 19, yes, they've had to be paid more money, and the furlough only covers their previous pay rates, not their new pay rates on national minimum wage. So it has made it complicated and challenging, but we have done it with the support of the employer and the apprentices themselves and ourselves. Nobody was made redundant, and they are going through onto level 3. So we're probably, as I say, bucking the trend a little. We are very aware of the issues across the sector, but we absolutely need to shout loud and proud, because we are here to support everybody and make a huge, huge difference. But we need to get those young people and older people. The eldest apprentice we have is 27 years old. So we've got older apprentices, and they have such value. And also people that are in the system at level 2, let's encourage them to move to level 3. Let's encourage them to move to level 4. There is an occupational map published, which gives a higher level apprenticeship. We're on with the aesthetics apprenticeship at the moment, and there's the intention to have a higher level wellbeing holistic therapy standard at level 4. So again, we can look at more of the psychology, the mental health first aid, the support for anxiety, and all these conditions that we all deal with on a day-by-day basis in the treatment room or in the stylist chair, and that is what goes on in reality.
Thanks for that, Diane. So there's a couple of questions that come out of this. I mean, for me, the first one is, has this problem, I think it's exasperated during COVID, but was it evident before COVID? Is there any particular reason why we've not had the people coming into the industry, or did we have them coming into the industry and they've left through the pandemic? Has anyone got any idea on that? I can remember going back years and years and years that there was no push to get young people into hairdressing and beauty, and people were with the drive seemed to be get people to go to university. There was the vocational stuff, and that's why we've ended up with the skill shortage in building and whatever. People were told, don't think higher, think bigger, go for, you know, and this is one of the sectors which has suffered from that. Would everybody agree that that's true?
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And for us, we're trying to build more around that now, about that perception. When you say, I don't know if you still have them, when I used to go and see my careers advisor at school, and they talk you through what your skills and interests were, it was always very much geared to further education rather than the other avenues that you may choose to go down. And I think now we need to sort of smash that model, and I think there are steps towards trying to change that. Because
that's a very different argument to COVID has caused this.
Oh yeah.
This is something which is nothing to do with COVID. This is about how can we get the education system to recognise the value of the work that happens with therapy. And I'm a great believer. I mean, I've struggled. I'm desperate to get somebody to do hand massage. I've been waiting a fortnight to try. I've tried for a fortnight to get a mobile therapist or anywhere when I could go and have a hand massage, because I've got problems with my hands. So I've never noticed it as much until I have recently, because it was always an abundance of places you could go to. But recently, that glut of people seems to have they've ebbed away. Lesley, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think just to kind of go back to your point earlier as well, Carolyn, that at the beginning of the meeting that a lot of people have decided to take on other jobs due to the uncertainty of the restrictions and the close contact nature. So there's absolutely kind of no long-term security perceived for our sector. A lot of people have moved away from it, like your girl going to go and make jewellery, and they've just decided not to come back. That's a huge issue, and we're losing some really, really skilled workers from our sector because of that. I think as well, we did always have a shortage, or recently we've definitely had a shortage of required skills, and I think that the industry standards are to blame for that. We don't have a regulation in our sector. I know I keep beating on about this, but what it means is now that we've got a lot more unskilled workers coming in there. It's affecting the demand for our fit for purpose qualifications. There is a lot of people out there in our industry, but not all of them really are working to industry standards. When I went and trained 30 years ago, when I was very young, obviously, there was no short courses. You did go in the more kind of regulated route and industry standard route. So it's a very, very different place now. And I think that we're not perceived as being as professional as we used to. That coupled with low pay and perceived kind of no progression in it, that people come into the industry, go and do it well and then leave. So I think it's about the perception of our industry and to be perceived as professional and highly skilled. It's stereotypical that we are not skilled, and we very much are. But that a lot of the reason for that is that you can go and do a half-day course and go out and start doing nails, etc. And I think that's really, really difficult. But what the immediate thing for me as well is that people coming out of college just now, the struggle that they've got is that the cohort from 2021, I'm worried that they're going to be perceived as not as qualified as others.
Yeah, and they will be. If they've only achieved 70% of the curriculum, then they are going to be, it's not something I've ever thought to say to a therapist, at what level did you finish? But you've got to think it now. If they're young, you're going to think, oh, right, unless she actually qualified to do this, or is it something that she was given because she happened to be in the right place at the right time, for want of a better expression? It seems to me that it's not just one problem is feeding off another, and how we get around that is it's more than one government department that we need to be tackling here. It's about how do we encourage the education system to encourage youngsters to go into the industry, but then how do we make the government realise the benefits that you bring will prevent and protect the NHS almost, especially around the mental health agenda. And it's very difficult to reconcile those two. That's not one argument and not one debate. So I'm trying to think of how we can do something which...
It's regulating the industry or getting some sort of oversight, because the problem that we've got, these short courses, the majority of them have not got any kind of client care, professional ethics, the mental health issues, dysmorphia discussions. All of these things are totally missed out when you go and do a half-day training on how to do
but I worry, Lesley, is that the industry itself, and shut me down if I'm wrong, but I don't think that those in government departments really appreciate the benefits that come from this industry. So they don't really understand how important it is for somebody to go and have reflexology. They think it as being pampering. That's the mindset. Is that
there is a lot of misinterpretation about the benefits of what we actually do.
I mean, it's seen as being a beauty treatment. You're going on a girly spa weekend. You're going to sit there and you're going to be pampered. But that pampered is, for me anyway, it's so important for my mental health, because for a lot of people, the only time that they actually are in a position where they get me time, that time when nobody can interrupt them, you get that hands-on relaxation, is when you go and have a treatment. I had a hot stones massage on Saturday. I mean, I had an hour and a half of sheer heaven. I mean, I was just laying there dribbling. But as funny as that may be, you cannot believe how I would have felt if that had been cancelled. I know that my mental health would have really suffered at the weekend, because that was from Wednesday on. I was waiting for Saturday when I knew I was going to be having that treatment. By the time Saturday came, I was excited, but I was desperate to have it. So how do we get that message out that we have to be encouraging more people into the industry, more people into training, because it's not just about going and having false eyelashes and pretty nails. It's the health.
It's not just the cosmetic piece.
It's
Caroline,
not.
it's the health benefits.
It's the health. You know,
there's
it's
also
so
an awful lot
important.
of work. If I can just mention as well, there's also an awful lot of work done around the touch therapies during for people living with, through, or beyond cancer.
Yeah.
So again, you know, there's a lot of work done in palliative care. There's a lot of work done for people going through treatments for all sorts of different conditions.
Yeah.
And I think it's building on the evidence base to show, you know, there was the BBC piece where the lady actually showed that a massage increases your B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes, so it increases your immunity. I think if we can get evidence to support, to prove what we can
point
do.
I was coming to, where can we get evidence of the benefits?
Well, that's
of
one
this?
piece.
Can I come in on this one?
Yeah.
So, obviously, the mental health and wellbeing report that we've just published, and that really kind of highlighted the gaps in the research out there. And whilst many of our services, you know, lots of massage therapy and touch services around the world are recognised in other countries, and support the medical profession as, like, you know, and allied health professionals, in the UK it isn't, and the NICE don't recognise massage therapy in this country and don't believe that the research is adequate to support that. And if we look at what's happening across the fitness and activity sector, and with what's happening with social prescribing initiatives, there's lots of activity going on across other sectors to support health and well-being, but actually we don't have the research as a sector to back up the fact that all of the benefits of the services.
Yeah,
that
I mean, our plan was, our plan was before the pandemic that we were going to have a big launch of this APPG in Parliament, and part of what we wanted to do was actually get therapists into the terrace pavilion or something, and actually sit there and give members of Parliament like a 5-minute tan massage or whatever. The point of that was not because it was like, you know, a clever thing to do. It was about letting them understand the benefit. You know, this is a really stupid thing, but when I think, how often do we actually open our palms? It's that sensation of totally relaxing your entire face or your hand because you've had somebody. It's a strange feeling, and until you've had it done, I can't explain it, but it's the only time that you actually get those muscles in different parts of your body, and the benefit of that is absolutely phenomenal. So we have to find a way of getting out the message that this is not about playing dress up. This is really important to people's health, but along with that, we have to encourage people to come into the industry through the training. Jack, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to echo what you said in terms of, I think for many people it's a point of like realization, and that sort of actually, you know, once they feel the benefits of the treatment, that's the inflection point, right? Yeah. And so I think, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that if there was a way that we can engage with the policymakers and the ministers, actually them experiencing it themselves, and obviously there were a lot of, you know, that can be arranged between all of us. I think that's when the point of realization comes in. Yeah. You know, certainly we have a lot of case studies, some, you know, customers that we work with, but, you know, these are anecdotal examples that we could share, but I think there's nothing more powerful than them experiencing firsthand.
Because I think in order to be able to find the answer to the long-term problem, we have to show the policymakers what the problem is, and they have to understand what you offer is not something which should be overlooked. It's something which should be acknowledged. And I think, I mean, Judith and Peter, feel free to wade in here, but I got a feeling they may be on calls. So I think we need to go. We are going to actually, apart from the skills shortage, the technical, academic stuff, that's easy to do. We can write letters. If you haven't already signed up to letters, please do so, and we can send the letters to the ministers. But what's on a piece of paper and is read by an official is not the same as actually experiencing the benefits of something. And I think now that we're at that point in the pandemic where we're looking towards coming out the other side, then we can maybe work on promoting the industry, which is what we intended to do in the first place, promote. I mean, we need to talk about the fact that the pandemic has made this more difficult, and the point Lesley made about people who are being qualified. Well, be honest about it. If they've only gone to 70%, they're not going to be qualified in some of the stuff. They got a piece of paper that says they can deliver. That is an issue, especially for people who worked in salons, haven't had that. So they've had their training cut short, and they never will return to it.
Can I make a point?
Peter,
Yes,
you're very
I
brave
think the issue,
interrupting me.
it's okay. I think there are short, medium, and long-term issues for this.
Yeah.
And I think from my side, it's dealing with, regrettably, the medium to longer-term issues. And those medium to longer-term issues in relation, focusing on the education system, is that we have an incredibly fragmented and atomized education system with community schools, free schools, faith schools, academies, further education colleges who are competing against one another in one fashion or another, chasing the students. And that creates this incredibly viscous sort of system, and fragmented and atomized at the same time. And also it doesn't take into account the sectoral and regional needs of for economies like the Merseyside economy, for the sake of argument. And frankly, it isn't the counsel of despair, but really until we manage to get a grip of that atomization and fragmentation and this sort of merry-go-round of chasing the students, so to speak, with competition, in local areas against each other, until we get some sort of much more structure to that and get rid of that sort of unhelpful, competitive way that education works right throughout the system, right the way through to higher education as well, we're not really going to make substantive long-term movement in this particular area. It isn't a counsel of despair, but I think that for me is this sort of medium to longer term aim, basically. Otherwise, we end up just like the the education system goes around in circles, frankly.
So what would you suggest, Peter?
Well, that's the point. I think it's more of a medium to longer term one. I don't have the sort of the short term solution, the solution in the next 2 to 3 years. I don't think that. I think that's sticking plaster approach. I think we just need to have a fundamental look for the medium to longer term in the structure of the education system. Right from sort of primary school, argued from early years, but let's not get into that. Right from primary school, and certainly from the early days of secondary school, right the way through. But the totality of the education system needs a good look at it, which reflects the needs of regional economies and the sectors like this sector in the across the country.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, how many medical conditions would benefit from holistic therapy? Has anyone got any idea of what kinds of medical conditions?
There's lots of them. I'll send you the report, but cancer therapies, touch therapy can impact on so many different things, everything.
Maybe we should do a debate on that, Kat. Maybe we should actually do a debate on the benefit of touch therapy. As a way of
been based on that extent, and we've got recommendations in there as well in terms of what's required.
I mean, what I'm trying to do, Peter, is create an argument for encouraging people into this industry and encouraging the education fraternity to encourage people. And when I went to my careers teacher, I said I wanted to be a doctor, and she said to me, "Oh, come on, you need to be realistic now. There's some nice factory jobs around there." So I think within the careers industry themselves, that there was, at the time when I was a kid, there wasn't that understanding that anything other than what they felt you should do, which was at the time was factory jobs. Maybe that's gone on.
Yes, look, can I just say, as a co-chair of the Health All-Parliamentary, the All-Parliamentary Party Group on Health, and a former sort of chair of the Primary Care Trust, there are issues which lay at a local level, and the ability to engage with the health service at a local level, which doesn't really exist that much. That's the problem. It's a sort of, it's like it's almost like a castle, the health service sometimes, trying to get into it. If you're not part of that establishment, you're not part of that traditional medical model, it's very difficult to break into that, really. And so that's where that localization comes in, where it's building up the relationships at a local level, if possible, with politicians being prepared to make the case for, if you want, what used to be the case of interlopers into the system, who are now valued allies to the medical professional, whether that be physiotherapist, therapy, or whatever it might be. And I think it's trying to extend that type of approach, which started to happen in the end of the 19th century and then mid 20th century. It's trying to extend that into our health service in a way, as I say, which is, you know, inclusive basically, and which reflects the needs of local communities. And I'll finish on this particular point. There are certain communities, let's say with smoking cessation. My community had this very, very high level of smoking, and we had to put huge amounts of money in the National Neighbourhood Renewal Fund to bring that down, and it's now pretty low for the demographics. But we had to do that at a local level and make the case at a local level. In the current environment, those sort of things the case for them have to be made also at a local level, and that those professions around the screen today can engage in that with their local members of parliament or local councils or local health authorities. But they've got to get into that, so to speak. They've really got to get into that and sort of get champions at a local level to help them through that process.
Yeah. But I don't think it will do us any harm to get the subject of this
No.
sector into all of the debates that we possibly can. So we should be talking about it in a health context. We should be talking about the industry at an education level. We should be talking about the industry at a base level. So we should be talking about every single aspect of the industry. We need to talk about at a government level, and I think that's what we need to do. Maybe make up a plan. We can do Westminster Hall debates. We can put in questions. We need to start, but I would really like to see, Eleanor, I'm really keen to do something around the touch therapy and to start promoting the industry that way, and maybe do something on the skills gap so that we can talk about at two different places at two different times, talk about how one benefits from the other. So we get more people trained, we get more people able to deliver this. They're two different government departments, but it's really important that we start working cross-government department. Diane.
Caroline, can I just, we are actually, with my Habia hat on, which is the National Occupational Standards Development piece, we are actually in discussion with the Department for Education around how the sector looks and the entry point level, and then where that takes young people when they come into it. And also in relation to what you said about getting hold of ministers and showing them the benefits of the sector. There was a showcase done with the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education at the Tower of London, and that was where that again, there were apprentices that went to that event and actually did exactly what you just said. They sat down and they did treatments on the people from the institute, and the institute didn't really fully appreciate. They all, like you've said, everybody seems to think that we're makeup and nails.
Eyelashes and makeup, yeah. So there's a couple of things here. We're going to write a letter to the Skills Minister, Peter, Judith, myself on the APPG, and you guys can sign it as well. We will talk about the academic bit. We will look to doing debates in different government departments to talk about the benefits of and the lack of resource, the lack of, there's several government departments here, so we will have to look for questions and debates so we can feed that into. I'll come to you now, Kath. We feed it into, and then we also need to think, once the minute that this lifts and we can get people in this building, we need to do a showcase event where we get people in, and we well, maybe not get Matthew Hancock and get somebody doing it. I want to say, you know what I want to say, and I'm not going to say it, a hand massage. I was going to say something else, but that kind of thing, so that they can actually feel it. And it'd be really good if we were to get people from, like, I know in Swansea there's a place that does treatments for people with terminal cancer, but if we had some people with terminal cancer to say what difference it makes to them to have a treatment, or somebody, you know, we'll pull out every resource we possibly can to get this industry to get more recognition. Kath Morgan, over to you.
You're on mute, Catherine.
I'm on mute. I was just going to add one very quick thing as well to all the things that you mentioned, which sound great, Carolyn, is of course this is also part of an inquiry that we're doing looking at the recovery post-COVID. So we will do a report looking specifically at how we can help the sector recover, push that out, send it to ministers, and make sure we get a lot of coverage in the press as well.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming. We've gone over time slightly, but I think it was worth it. I got a lot out of this session. I know Mr. Dow did. I will try to get someone to translate what he actually said. Those long words, I'm Welsh, son. I can't be doing anything more than 3-4 letters at a time. Thank you all for coming. It was really good. Helen and I went to see that report, and everybody else. I'll work through Catherine, and we will do whatever we can to get these. And let's get as much in before the recess as we can. So during the recess, we can be building on and maybe projects, doing things locally, like Peter said. But if we can get MPs involved now, maybe during the summer recess, they could go and visit local salons and actually experience something and say, look, this is what you can benefit from, and get them involved in. And if you've got a local MP who's not interested in coming, I'm available. I can go anywhere. I've got an electric bike.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.